So now it's pulling audio
It's
from my
the
phone.
Sig Show.
Okay.
It's the
It's
Sig
working,
Show.
brother.
It's the Sig Show.
All right. Great.
I've had worse. Trust me. If you go back and listen to my first couple podcasts, you'll be like, "Oh my gosh, who let this guy upload this to any kind of platform and let him talk to people?" You know, that's how I looked at my first few. It's like this guy thinks he
Well,
has something to say. Get him a
I
guest.
listened to the most recent one, and there's a stark contrast in the audio of that one and like the one because Gary was over at your house, right?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, what's interesting is both of them, the most recent being the rapper.
Yep.
Yep. So I was in his studio and we just had one
Huh.
mic like set up in the middle of the room. And so the the sound quality that we had in that environment on a just kind of a quick let's throw this together versus what I have
Yeah.
set up in my office, uh, two very different things. So
Yeah.
it was the first time I had went somewhere else and met with someone to record. So that was kind of
Yeah.
cool, and it was a neat experience. And I'd like to do
Yeah.
another one with him once his Project Paradise gets rolling, and bring him in here and have that environment happening. And we'll see what happens next. But great guy,
Great.
overcome a
Yeah.
lot, and makes no excuses for it. That's for sure. He owns his stuff, and he's moving forward. But the one with Gary, man, that was still pretty early on. Which all my podcasts are still pretty early on in the grand scheme of things. But
Yeah.
boy, we could have sat down. I had to cut that short, and
It was already like what 90 minutes,
at
2 hours, something
least
like
90
that.
minutes, and not my longest.
That's
I've
great.
had 2 hours and 50 minutes a couple times, and we weren't done. It's so interesting
Yeah.
how just conversation based it just lends itself to openly speaking about your life, about what you do, about it, just two people talking. You know,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
I think it's very different from, you know, when I think about what am I going to do for a podcast. I initially thought I'll do something leadership based. I'm passionate about that. Passionate about relationships. I'll find topics to talk about on a weekly, and very quickly figured out I really enjoy talking to other people. And
Yeah.
I think that just the conversation between two folks about their lives is so much more powerful than, and so much more content, like real dig in the dirt kind of content comes out
Yeah.
than me trying to manufacture so and so said this and I think it's a great idea, so I'm going to share it with you. It's
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
good. I mean, don't get me wrong, I try and find I've had a few where it's just solo and I try and find some good stuff to share with folks, but having conversations with different people from different walks of life who have experienced life in different ways is so much different than um, me sharing just my experience,
Yeah.
and
For sure.
this lends itself to me being able to share my experience too. So
Yeah.
it's kind of a double bonus where, number one, my experience, my life experience, I could probably do in one podcast and be done. When you're a boring old 50-year-old, it gets pretty easy to just snap your fingers and go, well, I was born, I got married, had kids, I worked, you know,
That's about it.
that's my whole life right there. The the most recent with in studio guest was Lori Cheeseman or Lori Hoback, and Lori is a classmate of my wife and I's. She went to school with my wife since they were like kindergartners or something, and she's been at Chrysler for 29 years. And a woman in manufacturing to me is something very special, especially in leadership. And I'm still trying. 2 weeks out from a 3-hour conversation with her, I'm still trying to figure out. I know that I'd have lost my mind trying to be 24 years old in a foundry trying to supervise a bunch of old men.
Yeah.
And she was a woman and did it. I don't know. it sheds a lot of light onto where we are as a society. Number one, that not only is she still standing, she's standing tall, and she is someone to to look to for advice on leadership, and is great at what she does. So it's just interesting to me, and then to speak to someone who has had it all and lost it all through addiction, and had to fight and call their way back to being a productive member of society that is now helping others, is even as it's just as awesome. So
Yeah.
but that's why I want to talk
That's
to you,
great.
because I think you're equally awesome. And I was jotting some notes down. I was like, man, it has been probably 2015, 2016 since we've seen each other. When did
Yeah, we moved back to the Charlotte area in 2015 because it was right
Wow.
before my son was born.
Wow.
So I was in Hartford City from 2009 to 2015. Some of that in college. So yeah, it's been a minute.
Yeah.
Like Jocelyn was a seventh grader.
Yeah. Yeah, she is. Yeah, she is not a
She
seventh
was a
grader anymore.
seventh grader on my soccer team,
That's
belting
right.
kids in the face
Oh,
playing dodgeball at
buddy.
the gym.
So, quick story. She plays all through high school, and plays in an alumni game like the summer after her high school, graduation. There's a guy
Yeah.
here in town named Shane Smith, and Shane's a big dude. Like he's a big guy, strong guy, and he's out there like going towards the goal with the ball. I think she's defending, and I think at one point she laid him out
No
in an
way.
alumni game. And I'm like, girl, you got to dial that down a little bit.
No, she's like, I don't care. I'm ending someone's career. This is
I said, what happened out there? She goes, I don't know, that guy wearing work boots,
I think one of my favorite moments I was coaching I guess the middle schools didn't have teams then. So it
No.
was that rec league that met out of the complex. And so Jocelyn was on my team. It was her and Gabby Henderson
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
defense.
Oh man.
And we were going up against, I'm gonna forget this kid's name, Nate something or another. Brown maybe?
Yeah.
Yeah. And he's a tall
Yeah.
dude. Like even in 8th grade, he was like taller than me.
Yeah.
And between her and Gabby, I think Nate spent most of that game on the ground.
Just brutal.
They
Man.
were unstoppable, man. They
Brutal.
just I love that. I was like 22, maybe 21, 22. And so I'm like over on the side screaming my head off like it's a World Cup
That's
final.
right, man. That's right. That's exactly it.
The parents were like, all right, let's take a beat. This is rec league. This is Hartford City on a Thursday night. Can we maybe?
But to them, it was World Cup. They were on.
It was to me too.
That's right.
I set them up for that, for better or worse.
So my big question is always, how does one end up in Hartford City? And I think for you went to Indiana Wesleyan, is that right?
Yeah.
You're originally from North Carolina, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, my dad is a pastor in the Wesleyan Church. There's 4 or 5 Wesleyan colleges, and he was like, listen, if you go to any of these Wesleyan schools, you get half off your tuition. That's my attempt to help pay for your college. And so then when I got a little older and I found out how much college actually costs, it's like, 40 grand a year or something stupid like that. It was super clear to me that I was destined for one of these schools. But I've always been a bit of a rebellious kid. So there's a Wesleyan school in South Carolina. That's where my whole family has gone for generations. And so I had met this girl who was going to Indiana Wesleyan. We'd met on a choir tour one summer. and she was talking about Indiana Wesleyan. And so I went up to visit her, loved the campus, felt huge. The school in South Carolina is like a third of the size of Indiana
Okay.
Wesleyan. So, so went up to visit her, loved the campus, loved all of that stuff. And secretly, I was 17, I was dating a college girl, and I was
Yeah.
like, this is the place for me. So that's how I ended up in Indiana from North Carolina. And then I think it was like, I don't know, my second week on campus. And one of the, how they have those like hall leaders, it's like upperclassmen that, so anyways, this guy pokes his head in my room and he's like, hey, you want to meet some college girls? This other girl and I had already broken up at this point. He's like, hey, you want to meet some college girls? I was like, yeah, sure. So we get in his Trans Am. We get in his Trans Am, me and my roommate and this guy, and I felt like we were driving through cornfields for 4 hours.
Yeah.
Like, and so we pull up to this big soccer field, and there's movie screen, like these big, big projector screens. And he was like, well, we're not actually, like, there'll be college girls here, but actually I need you to like serve popcorn for this drive-in movie thing that my church is running. And I was like, well, this feels different. And so I ended up volunteering at it was called the Gorilla Drive-In. It was this pop-up thing that Grace United Methodist did for the Taylor students primarily. And there was like, I don't know, 500 college students come out to this thing. And through that, I met this youth pastor, John Bundick, he was a youth pastor at Grace at the time. And we just kind of struck up a friendship. And that year, I led worship at the youth group a couple of different times. And then the summer between my freshman and sophomore year, there was an opportunity for me to lead worship at one of their campuses that met at that elementary school, the older one.
Okay.
So anyways, I interviewed with Gary Hall, who you've had as a guest on the show. I interviewed while I was home on summer break. So he and I had never met. I hadn't really been back to Hartford City except to do youth group stuff throughout the week. So he and I had never met, and he interviewed me on the phone while I was on vacation at the beach. And so we got like ocean roar in the background. I can hardly hear him. And he's like, listen, I think this is gonna be a great fit. Like, when you get back up here, just come out for a Sunday. We'll hang out. You can come over to the house. Julie will make lunch. It'll be great. We'll have fun. And that's how I got on staff at my first church. And yeah, that started in 2009. I was the worship leader for a few years. Then when Bundick left, I added youth ministry to the title. And I guess I was there for 6 years, 7 years, something like that.
Wow. It doesn't feel like that long. You know what I mean? Like, looking back on it, and hindsight's always that way. I think sometimes there are components where it feels longer than the other pieces, but boy, that did not feel like that long.
No.
I mean, typically when you have a great time and you have a great experience, it doesn't feel like it's long enough.
Yeah.
You know?
And it truly was a great experience. I mean, this church watched me grow up. I was 19. And Kelsey, my wife, we had just started dating. And Kelsey eventually came on, and she was doing children's ministry at the church eventually. But I mean, I was a kid when I started there, and we left when she was pregnant with our oldest. It's like, you think about all the life stages that happen in a relatively short amount of time. Like,
that's pretty incredible. I think as you were talking, all I could think about was some of the best stories in life start with, you want to meet some college girls? And come with me in my Trans Am.
Yeah. Like,
I knew there was
it
trouble
was,
on both of those fronts when you said, of course, I wanted to go meet some college girls, and my buddy had a Trans Am. That's all you needed to say. We could have, it could have went anywhere
it could, and like we're driving into the middle of nowhere. You
through.
think about like I'm from the city. This is my second week in Marion, Indiana.
Oh,
So
wow.
it's
Yeah.
so you think about like, I don't know, Charlotte has 1.5 million people
Yeah.
living in it. And so uh moving into Marion, 2 weeks there. I had a couple of friends, but not really. Like I knew my roommate loosely.
Hmm.
And so I was just, but I'm always like, I'm down for adventure. I'm down for anything. And as we're driving these cornfields, I'm like, I think this is how some of the like murder
That's
movies get started.
that's exactly it.
It's it's like this animated, charismatic guy comes up, hey, you want to go with me to this really cool party? There's gonna be girls there. And you're like, all right, I haven't seen another living soul in 20 minutes of
Oh man,
driving.
and I'm thinking about as you're driving, you probably don't even go into Hartford City if he's going back route to the high school. You just show up at this place that has a movie thing blown up in the middle of it. That's bizarre.
Yeah,
I
and
mean, and wow,
because you think of it, it's the cutback road, like right next to Ivanhoe's.
yeah, yeah, yeah. You
And
just
we were all over the place. I remember thinking to myself, like, if I screamed really, really loud right now, no one would hear me.
no, no,
And
no.
then we pull up to this like soccer complex, it also in the
In the
middle of
middle of a
another
cornfield.
cornfield. I was, I was unprepared for the amount of farming land that I had moved to. The lack of tall buildings and general pollution, and
That's
moving to a
hilarious.
place where everything's green and flat. You can see the sunset
Yeah,
actually. Like
yeah,
it was, it was culture, but like what a random connection that actually ended up being like the first 6 years of my adult life.
yeah. Man, my mind is a little bit blown right now. Just thinking about how culturally different that is, because Charlotte is culturally different than the middle of Indiana, especially small town
Sure.
Indiana. Um, I think you could probably go from Charlotte and Atlanta may be a little bit different as well, but anything bigger city and land in
Yeah.
Indianapolis and probably feel like, well, this isn't
Yeah.
that much different. Um, but to go from a big to Indiana Wesleyan, Hartford City, Upland, yeah, that'd be a tremendous difference. I've never really experienced that 'cause even when I moved away from here for a few years, it was in Indiana, it was in southern Indiana, but Madison, Indiana, however different it is, reminds me a lot of what Hartford City was when I was a kid. So it's still
Yeah.
small town, but a very active small town. Whereas Hartford City is I call it a town on the rebound, and it's got a lot of rebounding to do. We
Yeah.
need a Dennis Rodman. Um, in some ways, in other ways we don't. But
Yeah. Yeah.
someone that can rebound the crap out of a ball, that would be great. So you end up as a youth minister, and what were you studying at Indiana Wesleyan ministry?
I ended up there. I started out as a music major. Truthfully, I had no interest in youth ministry. I thought that kids and teens were pretty annoying,
Me
and
too.
I I was not in. I wanted to make music. I still love everything about music. I love being creative and kind of get lost in that space. But then I got to college and realized a couple of things. In my high school, I went to a small Christian high school, and I was the not in a braggadocious way, but I was easily the best musician by a mile
Hmm.
in that school. And then I got to college, and I was like, oh, I'm like average. I'm like C plus. There's some people. There were some like true prodigies that were studying at Indiana Wesleyan, and IWU has or had, I don't know what it's like now, but they had a really great music program. So if you were looking for like a private college experience, IWU was very competitive for talented musicians. So I got there, realized I was super average, and I don't like losing. I don't like being average at things. And these people, I mean, some of these kids, they were in the practice rooms. They would practice 8 hours a day.
Wow.
Easy. They would live in that practice suite. And I was just so much more interested in hanging out with people. Like, you're going to miss out on all the Trans Am activities.
That's right.
If you're, if you're in a practice suite playing Beethoven's Sixth Symphony or whatever. So,
hence,
yeah,
this is why I never learned to play an instrument.
You're just too busy talking to people?
Too many Trans Am opportunities.
Listen, I fully appreciate that. And then I also found out that like you have to be elite. You have to be the elite of the elite and know a bunch of really important people to make any sort of money playing music.
Sure.
And I wasn't elite and I didn't really know anyone. So I felt this like call into ministry in high school. And so I figured, I'll go study music and then get a job at a church as a church musician. And that's a good life. I just hated like the music performance side of things. So I was leading worship. I'd stopped really taking the music classes, and I'd switched my major into Christian ministries, like a generic pastoring degree. And then when Bundick was about to leave, this would have been before my junior or senior year of college. He was like, "Hey, I'm going to put your name." He didn't ask. He was like, "Hey, I'm going to put your name in the hat for who should like be my replacement." And I was like, I don't really like students. They smell bad. They require a lot of it. They're like babies, and like I'm not ready for that. And he was like, no, you'll be great at it. I've already put your name in, so like just take the interview, see what happens. And I'd been leading works for this church for a few years, so I knew all these people and felt comfortable being like in the conversation. And I interviewed and was still pretty apprehensive about it, got the job offer, and they decided on this team approach because they looked at me, I was 20, and they're like, we can't go from responsible adult John Bundick, who has his master, who has he's got years of experience doing this stuff, and he's like a grown up. We can't go from that to like still lives in a dorm.
Right.
At that time, I had no beard. I had all hair, and I looked like a baby. So they had hired this team of individuals, of college students, and then I was kind of like the leader of the team. And man, I loved it. It was so much fun. I found out that as a youth pastor, your job, and especially in a small town, like my job really was to just go hang out with students wherever they were. So I wasn't like I didn't do regular office hours. My staff meetings with Gary typically were like on his land in a 4-wheeler, doing work or just
nothing about that surprises me.
Yeah. I remember one time he put me, this was later on, but this was after his new house was built, and he was clearing some land. And so they had, I don't forget what they call it, but it's like the big lawnmower that goes on the back of
like a bush hog.
That goes on the back. Yeah, bush hog. Yeah. I was going to call it a bushwhacker, but I didn't want to embarrass myself. So anyways, he was like, here's what you're going to do. He was like, we're going to talk about, we've got some staff things to talk about. While we're talking, I want you to sit on the back of this tractor, and I just want you to put your feet on the top of the bush hog and keep it held down. And I was like, well, this feels weird. There's no safety devices. It's like, a half-inch of metal between my feet and a high-spinning sharpened blade.
Yeah.
I still have both of my feet.
That's good.
Although this is a side note, I did lose half of one of my big toes in helping Gary move some
Oh
stuff.
my gosh.
We were unloading a giant roll of butcher paper at the church, and he had taken the little pin out of the axle on his trailer, and I was wearing flip flops because I thought that was cool. And the end of the trailer came down, wham!
Oh my God.
That happened at the same moment that our preschool was dismissing for the day.
Oh.
There's like a bunch of 2 and 3 year olds, and I'm like swearing, and it was a bad look. These are some good times, man.
There are moments in my life when I either see something or hear about something, and your body, when you smash a finger, or you get hit with something or smash a toe, your body has this moment where it just goes into shock. It
Yeah,
it feels like you get electrocuted in some way, and that just happened to me. As in my mind, I could picture the tongue of the trailer
yeah.
falling on your foot, and you losing your toe, and whew, God.
It
Okay.
was on my birthday.
Oh
No, it was on
man.
my wife's birthday,
Oh, oh.
and we had dinner reservations somewhere in Indy that night. And I texted her and I was like, don't panic. She was still in college. She's like in classes in Marion. I was like, don't panic, but I'm going to the emergency room. They're gonna have to sew my toe back on. And I sent her a
Oh.
picture of it. It
Oh.
was so it was so gross. But what I found in youth ministry is that like that doesn't fall on a job description.
No.
Like going working your senior pastor's land
That's it.
or but it was so good, man.
Only on Gary's job
Yes.
description would it include those types of things where uh you got to stand on a bush hog, and we're going to have a meeting.
Yeah.
Meeting time is such and such. Stand on the back of the tractor, and while the PTO shaft is spinning, just inches from your leg as well. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, there's a lot going on there, and with this machine
It
that
was
will cut down
amazing.
small trees. And let's talk about what's going on in the youth ministry, and that's Gary.
He's like asking while I've got my feet on this thing, he's like, so what are you thinking for camp this summer? Like Southern Indiana again?
Oh man, I'm just
I'm like holding on for dear life. Like, yeah, Brown County sounds great.
yes, whatever. So we go from youth minister, and then you guys, you and your wife, did you marry while you're up here? I can't. Okay,
Yes.
I thought
So
you had.
yeah, she's from Michigan. And we got married after I graduated, but
Okay,
she's a year younger than me, so she had a year left.
whereabouts in Michigan?
It's
Didn't
pretty
know.
close to Toledo,
Oh, okay,
so it's very southern. It's
southeast.
like 30 minutes. Yeah.
Okay, you didn't know there was a
Um,
quiz, did you?
I wasn't
Yeah.
prepared. I did bring a notebook in case I needed to jot down notes. I didn't.
She's like, you better
It's
answer this right, Graham.
what are you doing? It's Adrian, Michigan, is where she's
Okay.
from.
All right. Fair enough. Fair enough. So, and are you originally from Charlotte?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I grew up in the city, um, in a pretty rough neighborhood, and we lived there until I was third. I was born there. Third grade, we moved more towards the suburbs, and then seventh grade moved to a legit suburb.
Okay.
Like we just kept getting further and further away from the center of the city.
Sure.
Um,
I was just out there
so yeah,
in early November last year. Came out for a conference called Ed Spaces. It's a furniture conference for furniture in schools and stuff like that. First time I'd been to Charlotte. I take that back. I may have been to Charlotte back in the early 2000s, late 90s, um, at a time when I was part of Amway, and we
really.
had a group with a friend of mine, AC Jones, and a few others that were just killing it. And we had some folks that were just running. It was a lot of fun. Learned a lot. Um, I don't think it was in Charlotte. I think it was in Winston Salem where I was saved at
Sure.
a Sunday morning, you know, church service, but it was on an Amway convention, outing where that happened.
No way.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
amazing.
it was a lot of fun.
In Winston-Salem.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's where it was. And I may get corrected by some fans that are well aware of where we were and where all we went. But boy, we spent a lot of time in the Carolinas at that time, traveling back and forth. That's where our pipeline was. But just recently, there, a friend of mine, Pete Lentz. Pete is living in Charlotte. He's in a couple of bands out there. One of them is a yacht rock band that plays pretty regularly. They're called Thurston Howell. So,
Thursday. A yacht rock?
yeah, I asked him how long their set
That's
was,
crazy.
and I said as long as the ideal thing would be a 3 hour set, so you could have a 3 hour tour with Thurston Howell. That would be
Yes.
perfect. But Thurston Howell plays around there, and then he's part of another group. Uh, Gosh, man, he does so much work out there. He stays very busy. He was at one time played at a dueling piano bar. I mean, the guy's an incredible
Mm,
musician, and kind of the same thing. He
yeah.
went to school to become a musician, went to Ball State, and realized, holy crap, I'm mediocre. This is a lot of work, and then
Yeah.
was playing in one of the playing at the student union one day, and someone said, "Hey, will you play for our? We have a thing going on here. Will you continue playing piano?" He's like, "Sure." Played piano for a while. Next thing you know, he got done. They paid him, and he's like, "I just made more playing piano for 2 hours than I did working a whole week at Arby's." Uh,
This is great.
I know what I'm going to do the rest of my life, and that's what he does. But he's got some great things going on. So you end up back in Charlotte. So when you get back to Charlotte, what do you do?
So we I was in seminary, so I got my master's at Indiana Wesleyan while I was still working in Hartford City, and there was a deal there's a deal in financial aid that I told Grace the Grace Church about before, where like basically the Wesleyan Church was paying the other half of my tuition in exchange for me working in the Wesleyan Church
Mm,
after I graduated. And so it was a confluence of a couple of things. So it was that I don't like money's not a wasn't a huge issue, but I was also like, this is a denomination that's invested a lot in my education, and I
hmm.
want to give back and be a good,
Oh,
yeah, I want to give back.
yeah.
And yeah, we also found out that we were pregnant um, uh, in, I guess this would have been like October, November of 2014. And so I was 24. Kelsey had just turned 23.
Mm.
We were scared out of our minds. We didn't have any friends. We lived in a tiny house over on High Street, like just, we were terrified. And and so it was that, and I'd been at Grace for 6 or 7 years at that point, and so feeling like is this the right time to explore what else is out there. um, and so we just looked at churches near Kelsey's family, and a couple of our really good friends in Hartford City had just moved away. They were two of our closest friends, and so we were feeling a little bit of loneliness. Moved back to, found jobs in Charlotte. It was the church that I grew up in. My dad was the senior pastor there, and he was moving to take another church. And so this church was like ready to take on its next phase. And so they brought me in as their youth pastor. They brought Kelsey on as the children's pastor. And then I had a role. They had a school attached to the church too, so I had a role there. So it was like a really great pipeline of like, hey, I can be involved in all these kids' lives. Talk about it. So did that. Part time was also working at for a nonprofit organization doing some fundraising. So cut my teeth on that, and it was not great. I mean, I was good at the fundraising, but I hated it. It was truly terrible. It just felt so slimy. Like there are certain people when they raise funds for nonprofit organizations, like they do it in such an authentic and genuine way. Like they're just being passionate about their cause and people just naturally give them money. I was too much of a salesman and I felt icky. Like you need to take a shower at the end of the day. Um, uh, so that didn't work out, but I then was trying to supplement our income. So I got a job at a marketing firm that was looking to branch out and do some stuff on social media and some website building. And that was kind of my first foray into the business world. Loved it. I loved talking with businesses about the problems that they're facing, the kind of people that they were trying to attract. And so loved that. It was great. Spent a year and a half doing that. And then the youth group at the church in outside of Charlotte that I was working at just got too big. Like there was like, I don't know, 60, 70 kids probably on that roster. And I didn't have enough time to like, I was spread way too thin. I was also finishing my master's at this time, and we had a newborn who refused to sleep.
Yeah, good times.
Yeah, my oldest, he didn't sleep through the night till he was like 9 months old.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, oh, I remember I was reading the German theologian Dietrich Bonhoeffer, but I was like, this was master's level work, so I had to like study his deep cuts.
Yeah.
and I remember I was reading like 1,000 pages a week, and I would like pull out the book, and my son's like laying on my chest. I'm just like, just crying because I'm how tired and everything hurt in my brain. It was brutal. So like there was a lot going on, and stuff at the church was going well. So I went full time at the church. They hired a new senior pastor. Some stuff went down. You talk about like stuff I wish I could do differently. Yeah, there was a so that job ended. I found another church nearby, so we didn't have to move. Another Wesleyan church. Went and did that for a year and a half. And I loved it. I loved the church. I loved my kids. It was similar to the youth group at Grace. Like I was getting to be a part of these kids' lives for years and years, because there are some kids that followed from the old church. And so like I was watching these kids grow up. I was a part of their lives. I was like going over their houses, friends with their parents. It was amazing. And stuff kind of went sideways on the adult side of the church. And so we had to step away. So then we moved to Alabama. And it was just a random connection. And this was like the big church. So there's, I don't know, 700-800 people that go there. The youth group had 120 kids in it. It was like the budget for the student ministry. I mean, it's like that's like its own church, right? Like 100 plus kids. And I was like, oh yeah, I've made it. This is the big time. And that was in 2018, end of 2018. So we have a great year, 2019, and then we get ready to go in for another good year, 2020, and the whole thing shuts down, like the whole world. And it was like, man, it was brutal. I'm such like a people person. I couldn't do I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
I couldn't do the virtual thing. I couldn't do I wanted everyone together all the time. I mean, you remember those bus trips that we took in Hartford City? Like that's my vibe.
Yeah.
Like pack as many kids as you can get into an enclosed area and just like see what happens. This like 6 feet apart thing was not good for me. So yeah, we've been all over since Indiana, and then really took a look internally at my life while we were in Alabama. When the whole world shut down, I mean, everybody did this, right? There's a lot of introspection that happens. Yeah. And man, I'd become addicted to the stage of youth ministry, like the person that everyone looks up to, and it was just like I loved that way more than like I was connected to my actual faith. And when that starts to happen, like the separating and dividing of your public self and your private. It's a recipe for disaster. So like I am this like personality on stage, right? And then I go home and I'm like completely spent.
Yeah.
And there's nothing left over for my wife. There's nothing left over for my kids. There's nothing left over for myself.
Yeah.
Like my whole life was in pursuit of like being someone for other people. And I was also just like taken aback by this notion that, and I'm not saying this is bad for other people, but for me, I was like, why should I be in charge of someone else's personal faith? Like that seems so weird to me.
That's interesting. I've never thought about that. You know, talking to Gary, you know a lot of folks that are involved in ministry. I never thought about how critical a piece you guys play.
And when a kid's going down a bad road, at least in this didn't happen as much at Grace, but in the churches I was a part of, it was like parents would come talk to me about it. I'm like, I don't know. What do you want to do?
Well,
They're like,
as an educator, I was a piece of that as well. That was a part of it. Yeah. So that transitions away from youth ministry at that point. I've lost you somewhere. We are first on the Schick Show. I can see him, but I can't hear him.
all right, how about
Hey,
now?
there he is. There you are.
Here we go. All right. What was it? Where did you lose me?
So at that transition, so from, you know, realizing, hey, parents are coming to me, looking for guidance for their kids.
I got nothing. I remember I was sitting in my it's an executive pastor, but it's basically like a COO of a church for a church. I was sitting on his back porch and I was like, there's a bunch of people coming to me for advice and help and guidance. I'm getting asked to preach and speak. The impact and influence is expanding, not decreasing. And oh, by the way, we have a global pandemic that has added some layers of complexity to adolescent development. And people are looking at me being like, hey, what does God think about all this? And I'm like, I don't know. And that's like an inappropriate answer for your spiritual guidance counselor, basically, to give.
I don't know.
And I was preaching one Sunday towards the end of my time at that church, and I had this like out of body experience where I was like watching myself talk, and the room was empty because we were speaking to cameras, and I was like, I don't know that I believe any of the things that are coming out of my mouth right now. They could be true, but they also could really, really not be true. And I gotta get out of here. if I was a parent, because for some people, like they wholeheartedly believe this stuff and it matters and it shapes who they are as a family and who they are as a community. And if I was a parent and I was entrusting my kid to that person and I knew that they really didn't believe what they were talking about, I would take my kid out immediately. And I was like, these kids deserve someone who like actually believes in what they're saying. And I love those kids.
Right.
I still do. I still talk to some of it's interesting that the youth group from Hartford City, I still talk to some of those kids more than any other and they're like the furthest remove. Kelsey and I still get messages from some of our Hartford City kids, and I'm like, thank God that I didn't have that crisis early on.
Yeah, you're right.
Because like all of those relationships, I still talk to Gary once a month, and all those relationships I value those so deep, and I value them to the point like when it became fake for me, it was time to step away, for sure.
Sure. So you're no longer in ministry.
No, done. not because I hate it. We're going to a little United Methodist church around here. I also found that like I just wanted a minute to like, I don't know if this is a forever thing. I think it is, but I just needed a minute to just be a regular guy at church.
Sure.
And
It's so interesting you said that, because before I got out of education, I said to Jennifer, there's going to come a time when I want to be Scott again. And that Mr. Schick is just a chapter, a part of what I've been, and it's part of who I am. But that was something for me as well, where I felt like when you were talking about giving, 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 and having nothing for your family, nothing for yourself when you got home at the end of the day, that's how I felt as an educator. I felt like I gave it all away while I was there. And it's not just while you're there, because now we have, phones, email, you name it, the ability to connect any time of the day or night. And, for me, I didn't give away my cell phone number. I never, was on social media with my students, nothing like that, until they graduated. So every June I would get, a few kids, reaching out, wanting to friend on Facebook. Now I will, connect with former students, and I'm no longer an educator, and they can kind of follow what I'm doing, and hopefully learn from me still. So, and that's what my hopes are when I connect with them now, is that they can kind of listen in, follow, see where I'm at. And, when they hit that time, like I told them that we're going to be adults in this world together, that they run up to me at Walmart and introduce me to their kid, introduce me to their wife, and not run from me. Because if they do, I will hunt them down. And but
I think
that's I think there's a lot of validity to that, and I know there's a lot of validity to that, knowing that being a servant to other people, being that servant leader, for some it's a never ending, it's just a, a bottomless pitcher of servitude. For me, there became an end to it, to where I was like, God, this is exhausting, and I'm missing some other things. I'm missing those Trans Am rides.
Yes. Yeah. I was missing like when you go away on a youth camp, for instance. So, but the last youth camp set that I did was 3 weeks back to back. So you leave on a Sunday, come back on a Friday. And that's like 3 weeks of my kids' summer. And like I just got tired of saying, like I would work during the day, and I was like available to my kids. So let's not like, I wasn't like absentee father. Pastors typically aren't, but I don't know, 3 nights a week, it was like, oh, I've got this meeting at church, and so I'm going to miss bedtime. And what does that do to like my wife, who is now responsible for sometimes the most aggravating and frustrating portion of the day, which is trying to get your 5-year-old into bed.
Oh man.
So like, I don't know and here's the interesting thing. And this is not true of all pastors. My dad, for instance, he is steady and consistent as a rock, and has been for as long as I've known him. And everything that he does as a pastor is true to who he is as a human. But when I got out of ministry, I was a better husband. I was a better father, a better friend. I was more kind to myself. Like, and that to me shows like one of the themes that's in the Bible that I'd really attach to is the fruit of the Spirit. And I think that it's applicable for all sorts of walks of life, whether you're spiritual or not. Of like, look at the fruit that your life is producing, and do you like it or not? And if you don't, then like change something.
Sure.
And so, like, if being a pastor was making me an absent husband and father and disconnected and inauthentic, like, that's not good fruit. Change something. And now, like, I love being at home. I love that, like, at the end of the day, I work hard all day long. And then at the end of the day, I get to go home. And tonight I get to coach my son's soccer team.
That's awesome.
And yell and go back to my Hartford City college kid days of yelling at high school refs
World
who have
Cup.
no idea what they're doing. Yes, World Cup for 8-year-olds, man. Um, so I am a big believer. Like if you don't like the things that your life is producing, change it.
Yeah.
Change some of the inputs and the outputs will get different eventually.
So what are you doing now?
Yeah, so I work at Cleaver Company. I had a job in between ministry and Cleaver. It was my first foray into sales. I loved it. It was so much fun. Um, it was like the purest intentioned interaction ever. So there was no like spiritual subtext, or it was like, do you have a problem? Yes. All right, let me see if my product can help you solve that
Yeah.
problem. If so, give me your money in exchange for this solution.
Bingo.
And if not, then have a great day.
That's it.
Like, and it was so like clean and simple. I loved that was like the first time in my entire life where I like clock in at 8 and leave at 5, and like then it's done. You could go home and you get to do whatever you're gonna do for the rest of the day. And they didn't care about what I believed. It was the first time where I hadn't like engaged in theological debate with my coworkers. It was so bizarre. So I love that sales role, but it was a very transactional sales role where we were selling a physical product. I'd gotten in part time at this consulting firm, Cleaver, just doing some support work for it. So leadership development. We build great teams. That's what we do. We use an integrated personal and professional development model that we've been crafting for 60 years to help organizations build amazing teams. And so they've got, we've got a small team. We've got a bank of coaches that go and deliver these development solutions virtually or in person to organizations. And so I was doing some contract work with them, nights, weekends, my off days, doing just delivery support. So building out the materials, making sure the coaches had what they needed, making sure these programs ran smoothly. And really found a home. That's probably the best word for it. Found a home between like all of the stuff about being a pastor that I loved, but like I really enjoyed business world more.
Mm-hmm.
So the pastor stuff that I loved was like talking to people about their issues and helping them solve those issues. Or helping, and even better, like helping them solve it for themselves.
Right.
And when we go into teams, we're not, there's consulting firms that are on the highly technical side. So think of like McKinsey, where you've got a technical problem and they come in and they help you solve it. We're on the people development side.
Okay.
And so we're talking about things like self-awareness, and trust, motivation, aspiration, and we have this list of like, for lack of a better term, like what are the virtues that make someone a healthy and high-performing team member? And we say, like, you can't always control the outputs of your business. There's a lot of things in that you can't control, but you can control your motivation. You can control your level of curiosity, your humility, your self-awareness, your resilience, your grit. Like yeah. Let me pause there.
It's so bizarre because I had no idea what you were doing. I have no clue what Cleaver is in any of that. And I love going in to these conversations, especially with someone who I haven't connected with 10 plus years or, right around there. And just 2 weeks ago, I'm having a very similar conversation, what you were just talking about with Lori, who is doing the same thing. She's a team builder at Chrysler, Stellantis. And she just sent me an email a little while ago talking about, I'm going to pull it up so I don't butcher that up, but she was having the same type of thing coming out of this email discussing, where the heck did it go? Sorry, man. Now I'm the silence guy. Maybe she texts me. That's my life, brother.
It's somewhere. It's somewhere within, buried deep within.
Yeah, it was so cool because she was talking about the emphasis they're having right now is on the our personal relationships and on
Yep.
your personal energy, what you're bringing to the table, the things you can control. And all I could think of when I was reading her email was this story I'd read that had been brought to me by a lady named Rhonda Rose. And Rhonda is a team builder for educators and administration teams down in, she's out of, I believe, Louisville, or she's in the New Albany, Jeffersonville area. And Rhonda was talking to us about controlling what's in your boat. And there was a yacht team, an American yacht team that was in this international race. And where this race was, lane one was the worst lane because it was near the shoreline. There was a like a wind
Mhm.
coming in, and when that wind came in, it would hit the rock face that was, near that shoreline, and it made the waters rougher and all this stuff. So it really took a lot of things that were outside of your boat, the uncontrollables, and made it difficult. So all these teams go through, and people that were in the middle, everybody qualified out of the middle. Nobody qualified over in that right lane. Everybody in that right lane that day just got killed. And not literally, but figuratively. They hit the rocks and
You
they
got
all
to be careful
died.
with those words in
You know,
aquatic
right?
sports.
Yeah, I
Like,
know that's bad. But at the end of the day, the U.S. ends up and it might have been, another team, but in her story, it was the United States team. And I believe it was the United States team captain that was telling this story in the article we read. They end up in that lane one, and all of them are disappointed because they
yeah,
realize no one has been successful in lane one today. And the captain just talked to him about, we can't control the wind. We can't control the rock face. We can't control the waves, the way they're coming off, and the water coming off the other boats that are going to, interfere with our progress as well. But we can control what's in our boat, and we can control what we do tremendously well. We can control how successful we are as a team in our boat. Let's control what's in our boat. And that's really resonated with me for a long time, since the day I heard it, that all these external factors, in your life, in your business or whatever, you can't control them. I can't control whether someone's going to get a grant to be able to buy, a new music room, or a new cafeteria, or a library, a media center, whatever. But what I can control is me still serving my customer, for one. I can control me serving my family. Those are the things that I've got to do well. And when we allow those external factors to interfere with what we do well, we need to make a change. And that's what I'm hearing from you, and that message I gotten from Lori earlier, and I continue to think about that in a lot of ways with, being a dad, raising my kids, and I see them, a struggle come along, and oftentimes my response is control what's in your boat.
yeah. No, it's so good that that the world around us, corporate. The, I hate saying corporate America; it's such a cliche,
Sure,
but like all rightfully so, it only cares about results. Like increasing shareholder value is
hmm
the point of business. It's not to care about its employees. It's not a person. It can't do that. It's an institution. It's an organization. It's designed to increase shareholder value, and so it's never going to ask you what your level of humility is. It's never going to ask you about if rate your motivation today. But what we found is that the teams that regularly focus on these things that they can control: motivation, humility, curiosity, creativity, resilience, these things that you can absolutely control, they're going to win more than they're going to lose.
hmm
And that's going to increase the shareholder value the way that the organization wants. And it's going to give you a healthier, more integrated experience at work. You spend most of your time at work. You spend way too much time to like hate what you do or not
right.
feel satisfied and fulfilled. Like, what would it be like if organizations all across the country were asking their people, giving them KPIs, giving them targets and metrics, and saying, you've got a plan of action, and underneath that plan of action are going to be these principles that we want you to live by every day. Because if you live by these principles every day and you follow your plan of action, then more often than not, you're going to hit your KPIs, you're going to hit your goals. Because you can't control what the market's doing, you can't control changes, you can't control. There's a lot of stuff outside the boat.
Buddy, we learned a lot during the pandemic about being able to control those things outside of our, our boat. And
Yeah.
if there wasn't a better time for me to hear those words, I don't know what it would have been. I want to backpedal a little bit because you had mentioned you were on camera sharing. I'm assuming you were giving some sort of message to the church,
Yeah.
and you just had a moment where you thought, oh, what am I talking about? And the reason I ask is because this is something that I'd asked Gary about, and you may have heard this when you were listening. I asked him if it's a struggle for him on a regular basis with his faith, and he did not have the same experience I have, where I struggle, I question,
Yeah.
and it's a battle with me on a regular basis of what I don't necessarily think it's what I believe, but parts of that I believe. Does that make sense? And
Yeah.
I think from someone who I'm not trained in, the ministry, I'm not well versed in the Bible. I'm out here absorbing it like probably a bigger percentage of the world than we'd like to admit. Trying to figure out uh, what my spiritual goals are. Does that make
Yeah.
if that makes sense? That's the way I see it anyway. And I struggle with that on a regular basis. Is that what you were experiencing there? Was
So I had a couple of, I was reading a couple of books. I've always been a big like question, doubt, kind of a skeptic's too negative of a word,
sure.
but I like to poke holes in things. It's just kind of how I'm wired. Um, and I was reading this book and it described God as a cosmic vending machine. And he was like, think about how you approach your faith. He's like, think about how often you put in things like I'm going to put in my church attendance, and I'm going to put in my Bible reading, and I'm putting my good deeds and my tithe, like my actual money. Then I get, and like I'm going to put in all these good things, and then I'm going to press the button that is prosperity, and then expect God to like give those things, or expect an easy life, or like when my son was born, I was pleading over and over and over again, just make him go to sleep. Just like make him go to, just 6 hours. I'm not asking for much here. And then but you think about all the things that we ask God for, and it was based on this relation, at least for me, it was based on this relationship of like I did all these things for God. And if he loved me, he would do all of these things for me. And which is such a backwards, terrible way to. And so when it was phrased up as a cosmic vending machine, I was like, oh, that's me. That's 100% me. And I started to go down this path of deconstructing everything that was in my faith and then building it back up for myself. And I struggle probably isn't the right word. It was like, how do you know something's true?
Mm-hmm.
And at least from my seat, I came to this point where like everything that I believe to be true is filtered through such a finite lens of my own perception of reality. There's a book, Liminal Thinking by Dave Gray. Have you read this book? It's a great book. 10 out of 10 recommend. He has this drawing in the book where he puts it's like building blocks, and it's like beliefs, systems, blah blah, like all of your thing, and then it's this huge block, and then it's sitting on this really tiny line that says your ability to perceive reality, and then underneath that is actual reality. And I think about like everything that goes into like all of my presuppositions, that I'm white, that I'm a male, that I was born to a middle class family, that I was born in the South, that I was born in a city, that I was born in a Christian family, my dad was a pastor, like all of these things that none of which I really asked for, shape a really specific type of reality. A good point, a case in point of this is that in the United States, we're a very individualistic culture, right? And salvation, like getting saved, is a one-on-one thing with you and God. But if you go to a tribal culture, the patriarch of that tribe gets saved, and the entire tribe is then saved based on the salvation of the patriarch, because it's, and they read and I remember they read the exact same text,
Right.
the exact same verses, and come to completely different conclusions. And so in that moment, I had two options, right? I can say, well, one of these things is wrong, one of these things is right. And because I'm me, I'm going to go with my thing is right. And I started to think about like how big God is, or the divine, or however you want to call it. I'm like, doesn't it seem doesn't it seem truer to this cosmic God, that both, like he's got enough room for two things to be true, and just because like a human brain can't reconcile those two things, that like he's not bothered by that, I don't think. And so I started to look at like all of the ways in which I, as a pastor, was drawing boundary lines and saying, if you're this, you're in, and if you're this, you're out. And I was like, man, the only people that I saw Jesus drawing lines with was like church folk. He was like, church folk are out. They're definitely out. Like, whoa. But like everyone else, you're my people. And that was a pretty brutal. I'm like, I'm working, and like I said, and I'll say this 100 times because I don't want this to come off disparagingly, to like, I had great opportunities and great people at every church that I was a part of, and I don't like, it truly was great. And it made me who I am today, like 100%. I still credit Gary as being one of the top 3 people in my life that taught me about leadership. And but I'm at this place now where I'm just like, both things are probably true and also not true, and I don't think God is bothered by that.
I heard something on a show I was watching, and it was, I think it was True Detective. It's on like HBO. True Detective.
Great show.
Right. It's
I
season.
haven't seen the new season, but
season 3.
the first 3.
So season 3.
Yes.
There's a white detective and a black detective, and they're having a conversation about this investigation. And one of the detectives speaks up and says something about, why don't I'm worried if we do that, this may happen. And the lead detective says, he may not be right, but that doesn't mean he's wrong.
Yes.
And I thought that was really
That's a great scene.
interesting. I've said before to people, and in my podcast, that I can be more than one thing. I'm more than one thing. I don't have to be defined as just one thing, and which leads me to believe that what you're saying, I may not be wrong, I may not be right, but that doesn't make me wrong. If I'm not,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? If I'm not right, that doesn't make me wrong. It's not linear in that way. It doesn't have to be binary. We can look at it different ways, and as you're saying, with patriarchal system, if one person is saved, they're all saved. if that can be interpreted through the same book, the same teachings, it has to be able to be, and those folks accepted. Um, Maybe I'm not wrong. I may not be right, but I don't think I'm wrong.
And like,
And that's where
who's
my struggle is. That's what I was trying to find out from Gary was I struggle. And he's affirmative in his faith, and that's I'm thank God I'm happy about that. I'm not. I still struggle, and I still question. I still there are things where it doesn't. I don't know if it makes sense or what the correct terminology would be, um, but I have questions.
and I am more convinced now than ever that the pursuit of knowing that you're right is one of the most fruitless pursuits a human being can go on.
As an administrator, it's so interesting. I'm glad you brought that up. 'Cause I was thinking this earlier when you were talking. I was never in pursuit of being right. I was always in pursuit of right. And those can be two very different things. I could be absolutely wrong and find right.
Yeah.
I can't always be right if I'm finding wrong. You know what I'm saying? Like I wanted to
Well,
make sure. You were someone that was a youth influencer, a youth mentor, and same as I. And I always was most concerned about the outcome for that kid more than me being right.
100%. I used to, when I would talk to parents and they were talking about like kids doing normal high school stuff, um, like I don't remember if you remember, do you remember when we had that big lock in where we like rented out the bowling
Mm-hmm.
alley? Were you around for? So I think some kids at one point during this broke into the well, we were way overrun. I thought we'd have 200 kids there. We ended up having like 600. There was more kids at our lock-in than not in Blackford County. Um, and so while we're there, this is middle of the night. I only had like 15 adults. It was very unsafe. Um, and so it was like I think it was me and Aaron Henderson were running the bowling alley portion of the thing. It was me and Aaron and Jennifer, maybe a couple of others. And some kids broke into the whatever that restaurant is on the
The
other side,
pickle,
and they were
yeah.
like getting into the bar and stuff. And I'm like, well, Aaron's here. This is kind of perfect. um, just like normal high school shenanigans. But I remember after that, I mean, like we dealt with the kids, called the parents, we had the whole thing. I remember afterwards, one of the parents was like really having a go at it. And I was like, let me ask you something. What did you get into when you were in high school? And he was like, well, I don't want to talk about that.
Right.
And I'm like, exactly. I'm like, can we take an approach, not just with students, but like, I'm thinking about this with my own son and my daughter now. Like, can we take an approach where we parent or teach or lead with the human outcome in mind?
Mm,
Like,
yeah.
would I rather my son follow all the rules and at least when I'm looking, say the right things and do the right things? Or would I rather know that like he is adopting the kind of traits that will make him a healthy, successful
Right.
human being? I tell him all the time, like, I want you to fail and mess up a billion times. And my commitment is I'm going to be there with you when you do that because I'm far more concerned about who he is when he's 16 and then when he's 20 and then when he's 30.
Mm-hmm.
I care about who that man is more so than I care about him like making sure he said yes sir when I asked him to do something.
Right.
Like, come on.
I, I can't argue that at all. I recently told someone that Derek Jones on the podcast. I was talking to him about I never censored our kids' music, and that was because of my dad and his reaction to finding an Andrew Dice Clay tape in my car, and I knew from that moment I wasn't going to censor them. I would partner with them to make sure they were aware, just because someone else says it doesn't mean you have to.
Yeah.
The context that someone says something and matters. And, listening to a comedy tape is very different than what we say on a regular basis. Let comedy be comedy. Let movies be fantasy. Let books be fantasy.
Yeah.
Let music explore our emotions. We don't live by a musical creed. I don't run around going, oh well, I listened to, in a white room with, listening to Cream, so now I've got to live by that. That's what I live by,
Yeah.
guys. I, we once again, we are more than one thing, and allowing ourselves to be fallible is really important, and allowing our children to fail is critical. Their ability
Yes.
to overcome failure is so important. As a classroom teacher, I would purposefully put things wrong on the board so they could see how I would react when they called me out on
Yeah.
it. When they would say, "Hey, Mr.
Yeah.
Schick, you spelled something wrong," I go, "Oh man, thanks. I appreciate you being there for me." If
Oh, it's so good.
if my if whatever was going on, if there was a failure of mine, something that wasn't right or perfect or whatever, I wanted to make sure that they saw an adult who could manage being corrected by a child. And hopefully, by seeing that, they wouldn't have some crazy reaction when someone called them out for
Yeah.
something they were failing at or not doing good enough, or had missed. Eh, I just think, as a society, we struggle culturally with any kind of failure, any kind of
Yeah.
nothing.
And don't you feel like that's getting worse, not better?
I do. And it's being painted. We airbrush everything now. I think about as a kid, you would see, for me, seeing a magazine with a beautiful woman on it or something, or with a family or whatever, that had been airbrushed and touched up. And it wasn't until I was probably in my teens that somebody said, "Well, that's airbrushed and touched up. They edit that picture." I had no idea you could edit a picture. Here I am, a 15, 16-year-old going, "Really? They do that?" They're like, "Yeah, they do that." And I'm, "Oh, okay." Learning later on that, a musician, a band that puts an album out, it took 50 takes. I had no idea. And so, when I was in my band and we go and record and I'm expecting to hit it in one take, I had no idea that, we could actually go back and do that however many times it takes to get it that perfect.
Yeah.
Maybe why I continue to love live music so well is because I'm waiting on that moment where they screw it up, or maybe they did it the original way. Which is it? You know?
And it's something that we see in the companies that we work with, is that some of the best leaders just have a different relationship with the word failure.
Boy, I'm telling you.
Um, and they foster this, we saw, like, we're not losers, we're learners, we're not failing, we're growing.
Yeah.
And it's this idea of, I think about the first time that I led worship, like when I was playing guitar and singing at the same time. It was awful. I it was the first time I was doing it by myself. I was at a church in Canada. I was on this choir tour I was telling about earlier, and this big church, and the guy who normally led worship was sick or something, and so the choir director's like, "Great, grab a guitar, let's go." And I knew the song backwards and forwards. I knew I could do it, and I got up there and I started it out twice as fast as it's supposed to
Oh
be.
yeah.
And so then the band's trying to catch up to it, and I'm like having to rap by the end of this thing, basically. It was so bad. That was my first time.
Yeah.
And like, I think about the last time that I led worship, or the most recent time that I was leading, and it's in a church. My brother goes there, and he also leads worship, so it was just the two of us. And I thought about how free I was. I literally wasn't thinking about what I was playing. I was just being creative and in the moment, and there was no stress, there was no nerves. It was just like making music with, my brother and having a great time. And so like you can't do something at that level. I've probably played, I don't know, 10,000 times. And like you can't do it at that level until you've done it the first time.
That's
and
right.
the first 100 or 1,000, like,
There's a lot
and
of
people are so scared of, they want to be at that 10,000 hour stage like that.
right.
And
You can't get there.
there's no easy button for doing something 10,000
No,
times.
there is not. And I think there's a lot of power in what you just said of, being willing to put yourself in a vulnerable position is the key to being successful in whatever you're interested in. We're a hyper produced society right now, and social media
Yeah.
has certainly done that. It's also allowed us the other side of it, though. Two things can be right about it. Social media has also revealed that we are a very hyper produced society. Whereas without it, I don't know that, I knew some of the things I know now, where I'm like, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
that's really, that was it. That's how that happened, or, that's what was going on, or, that's what that person really looks like. I would have never have known what Sloth from Goonies looked like without social media. I would have never known what that guy really looked like.
I still don't know what he really looks like,
Oh
but
man,
I'm not going to.
he's a big hulking guy, man. He's a great looking dude.
That's amazing. That is incredible.
Man, I so appreciate you and jumping on here with me. It's great catching up with you. I've got a meeting
likewise.
here in a couple minutes. I got to jump off on, but dude, keep doing the great things, man. I'm excited for you and your family and your kids. And you got a boy and a girl, right?
Boy and a girl,
Yeah.
8-year-old and a 3-year-old, and they're plenty. We live. I have an older brother and younger sister, so we live around the corner from my brother. He's got 4 kids. My parents are up the road a little bit. They've got some land, and it's my sister lives in Nashville. I try and convince her to move back this way every time. They're not doing it. But it's a really sweet season. The stuff we're doing with Cleaver it's the right kind of thing. You were talking about like being right and aiming at right. I think what we're aiming at is right, and it feels like we present our development plans at the beginning of every year and say, well, we do this for ourselves internally for Cleaver, and kind of the title of my development plan for this year was commit myself to work that's worth doing. And helping professionals build great teams, like that's work worth doing.
That's awesome.
And building on all the other stuff that I've gotten to do, there's a lot of gratitude in this particular season. So
Good.
I appreciate you having me on and let me talk about it.
Yeah.
This is like,
I noticed early on your start with Why up there, and I'm a huge Simon Sinek fan. It's one of my favorite go-tos on LinkedIn, go-tos in books, and I'm not a big reader, but I'm a listener, so I listen to a lot of his stuff. And man, what a great mind that guy is. But hey, brother,
I know you got to hop. I appreciate the time. Yeah. Let's not wait another 10 years before we.
Well, I can't wait to catch up.
Tell Jocelyn and Addie that I said hello.
They're listeners.
I haven't talked to them. I haven't. Well, Jocelyn, Addie, hello. I miss you guys. I hope that you give your dad a bunch of grief. Well, the first time I listened to Chick Show, and I think it's their voices that are doing the intro.
It is, yeah.
I was all of a sudden just taken straight back. 23 years old, man. Hartford City. That was a moment for me. So yeah. I have much love and respect. I hope Hartford City gets its Dennis Rodman soon.
Me too, man. Me too. Yeah. Without the dress, I can do it without the dress. But hey, if that's the way it comes, I'm okay with that too. As long as we get a rebound.
We'll take it any way we can
right.
get.
We're just looking for rebounds, brother. Hey, good to see you, man. There's a fist bump out at you. Right. And stay out of trouble. Good to hear from you.
All right.
Bye.
See you, man.